I'm Drew Cooper. I am fortunate enough to be head of sales for Expandly and look after a great team of business development managers who support sellers expand their brands into Europe. Yeah, so I'm speaking with brands every day, and typically they have very similar pain points. And they tend to start with how difficult is it going to be? So how tricky is it going to be for me to expand into Europe? I've heard various stories about having to go through compliance measures and the tax and the VAT element and how difficult it is getting stock into the region. That's the biggest one. The compliance piece, of course, is always a tricky one that they find to navigate. But as we'll hopefully touch on in a minute, the complexity actually isn't that bad. Once you ensure you follow the correct steps, it's actually relatively straightforward in order to get your products to market. So as you did when you started your business, so as any founder or entrepreneur does, is to start with a business plan to ensure that you've got the right idea of how you're going to launch. You've taken a look at the market to identify if your product is going to fit. You've got your commercials in order, and you sort of understand where you want to be in 6, 12, 24, 36 months time. So business plan is absolutely critical. It's really important to think of the UK and EU as the start of your journey. So as if you're starting again, you're starting your business from day one, put all of those pieces in place, just to ensure that you don't have any higher expectations than maybe you should, but also you have a real clear route to market. Yeah, absolutely. So we tackle that by something called a feasibility study. So what we'll do here is we'll take a look at your current market. So in this case, you're based in the US. We'll then identify whether your product can be sold in the UK first and foremost, whether there is a market for it, full stop. And then we're going to identify who your competitors are and then place you against those competitors based on the US sales and ranking. We're then going to look at market share. So how much market share, and we're going to have a look at your 6, 12 months and beyond, what your potential turnover could be based on that sales velocity. Okay, so there's two pieces taken into consideration here. There's two bits of compliance you'll be pleased to know. So there's the business compliance piece, which is the VAT, the tax element, and there's a product compliance piece. So product pieces to make sure that they're compliant for sale and fit the regulation within the UK or EU. We'll start with the business compliance, so the VAT. So in order to trade, you need to have a VAT number, so value-added tax. Now this is in order for you to post the VAT submission to the government in a similar way to you might be familiar with sales tax. It works slightly different, but essentially it's the same thing. So that you'll post that money's owed to the local government. That'll come with an EORI number. So an EORI number is the shipping element, the customs clearance piece of the VAT number. So those two pieces together mean that your business will be compliant for tax and importation, so customs fees and duty. So those two pieces together mean that you can trade as a business. So your US entity or your international entity can apply for VAT. This isn't about registering a business in the UK or EU. You can do that with your current business entity. The second piece is the product compliance to ensure that your products can be sold, that they fit the regulation, and they've got the appropriate markings, claims, ingredients, directions of use on the packaging in order to educate the consumer appropriately. Those two pieces together, along with what's called a responsible person, which is the representation within Europe or the UK, which you'll need in order to trade, make up your compliance piece. So once you've got those two bits, you're ready for trade. Yeah, sure. So the VAT piece and the product compliance piece is now done. However, there is a couple of extra pieces that bolt onto that you need to take into consideration. So there's a packaging law in Europe called EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, and that is also joined by an electrical regulation called EEE. These need to be taken into consideration dependent on country. So it's not European-wide yet, but it is in some countries within Europe. So that will need to be filed for in a similar way to VAT. However, it's not particularly costly, dependent on the, the type of packaging your product's using. So there's no need to be too concerned about that. However, the other piece is translations. So something which, particularly if you're just selling in the US, that you might not necessarily be accustomed to is the translation of products, because of course it's unlikely to be needed in most cases. When you come to Europe, for two reasons, you're going to need to look at translating your labels. The first one is from a regulatory perspective. So wherever you're storing goods or storing goods, you're going to need to have your label translated, or elements of your label translated into that country's language. But of course, the second piece, and arguably the more important piece, is the commercial aspect of that. So how you want your consumer to be educated on your product. And of course, the best way to do that is for them to be able to read it in their own language. So a couple of elements to that, but certainly translations and the packaging regulation of EPR are critical. Yep, so we've done all the compliance piece and the VAT and identified the products can be sold. Now the exciting bit starts. So now is the sending of the stock, which of course you'll be well versed on. You'll all be sending stock internationally for where it's manufactured into the US or other countries within the world. So that piece will be familiar to you. But now it's about ensuring that you've got physical representation in the country that you're shipping stock into. So if it's coming from somewhere like China or it's coming from the US, making sure that the country you're shipping to in the UK or EU, you've got a customs clearance agent who's well versed on the complexities of doing so. That piece, once that's done, as I mentioned, you've got your product compliant, you've got your VAT, that will come with an EORI number, which is the shipping element of the VAT number, giving you authority to be able to import your goods. And your customs agent will help you get that through customs and then move it into, whether it's Amazon FBA or you're going to a 3PL, and you'll be able to move your stock in and start the really exciting bit, which is getting some money. Okay, so you've chosen your marketplace, or you've chosen your market. So you're now, for the purpose of this, we'll talk about you in the UK. The next step for you would then be to take a look into what other countries are appropriate for your product. So it may be your next step, the obvious one would be Germany. So your goods are also going to have a place in the German market. So you're then going to take the next step, which is utilise the same approach that we've just spoke about and apply for your VAT in Germany. And that's then going to give you the ability to start trading in Europe. So you can import your goods into Germany and start trading. You then need to think about your business approach to how they're going to be sold in a region like the EU, because you can opt to store stock in individual marketplaces, for instance in FBA, and then you can ship them inside of Germany, or you can opt to do a pan-EU program as an example, and store your stock in multiple regions in Europe. Or if you wanted to, you could store them in one place, use a 3PL, look at other marketplaces such as eBay, some other ones in the EU, Zalando, store stock in a 3PL and distribute it D2C. There's lots of options when you're there, lots of marketplaces outside of the ones that we know, Amazon and eBay, lots of opportunity, lots of different nationalities, great place to start trading. Good, so look, I just want to recap on the complexity piece that I spoke about right at the beginning. So we spoke about a lot of different elements to this. It seems like there's a lot of variables to it in order to trade. However, expanding makes it really easy. So it's an all-in-one solution to cover all of these bases without you having to think about them individually. So there's three key stages really. There's compliance, logistics and omni-channel. Those three things together will make your expansion seamless. So let's do it, come to Europe.